Welcome to this episode of The People Dividend. I am absolutely delighted to have in our virtual studio today, Jonathan Bennett. I love how Jonathan describes himself as having been where his clients are now. I think that's a neat way of saying things. It's sort of then and there, or present and past all combined at once. But let me get serious about Jonathan Bennett for just a moment or so and stay serious throughout our podcast conversation. Jonathan Bennett is an advisor and executive coach for purpose-driven leaders who need help solving their organization's toughest obstacles. With experience in urban, rural, remote, and First Nations communities, Jonathan's expertise in social purpose, business strategy, governance, branding, change, and communications. He has expertise in those categories. His coaching draws on 25 years of creativity and leadership success as a chief executive officer, board member, and founder. And he's known for his deep learning and his breakthrough solutions that create insights and new strategies. Jonathan Bennett, welcome to the People Dividend. Why don't you tell our audience about who you are and what you do and all of those kind of good things.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Mike. It is so great to be here. Yeah, my name's Jonathan. I am based in Ontario, Canada. I'm coming to you from Williams Treaty Territory. I have a really storied and varied background. I started life wanting to be a novelist and a poet, and I did just that. I wrote a bunch of books, but it turns out poetry doesn't pay. So I developed a career on the side, which then became my main thing. I founded a management consulting company, did that for 10 years, became a B Corp, and was able to have a management buyout. And these days, I'm able to serve social purpose leaders and others that want to make big changes in the world.
Did that stem from your poetry, or what was your what kind of poetry did you write?
Yeah, I wrote lyrical poetry. I've I think three books of poems and a couple 3 novels and a collection of short stories. And I think the common thread, and I've looked for it over the years, is I'm drawn to narratives and narrative theory, which I see in the corporate world all the time. I see points of change, inflections that draw people in. And I kind of have a narrative lens when sometimes when I'm looking at that, or when I'm building strategy and trying to tell organizational stories or help the leaders do those kinds of things. Yeah.
Jonathan, what does that mean, narrative? I hear that word a lot, and people say, "Oh, it's the narrative of the organization, or it's this person's narrative." Can you break that down for our audience about what does that mean in everyday terms?
Yeah, I think that as humans, we're drawn to story. And I think that means that we like, for example, the origin story. Like you asked me, tell me about yourself. Rephrase, that's just tell me in a short way, Jonathan, tell me your life story, right? Like tell me
right.
And we love a shape. We love a beginning, a middle, and an end. We're naturally drawn to points of conflict and tension, and we want desperately to see the resolution of that conflict and tension. So I think, when organizations and when leaders are trying to tell their organization's stories, they will often revert to how it was founded, the early days, tell a story or two of some really difficult challenges that they had to overcome and where they are today. And so that just shapes, a narrative arc in the same way that we understand how a TV program or a movie or a book also has a narrative arc and a drive.
That makes so much sense as I think about origin stories. I visited a relatively new museum, and it opened maybe November 2023 in Palm Springs, the Agua Caliente Cultural Museum. And I mentioned this because you mentioned about First Nations people. And as you enter the museum, there's I don't know if I guess that it's an interactive exhibit on the origin story, the Agua Caliente. And I thought it was a kind of complex origin story, but they all are when you think about it. And I do think in organization consulting,
Hmm.
there or in executive coaching, there is something about that origin story. And I also love the question about, well, what happened? How did we get here? What happened? It's a great way of thinking about that. And you said you're in Williams Treaty territory. What does that mean for listeners who may not be familiar with that?
Oh, okay. In Canada, when Canada was being colonized, the British made treaties, and of course have not kept up with them very well over a long period of time. And so, as an act of reconciliation, increasingly Canadians are learning about the land that they're on and who are the original owners and are the continued stewards of the lands that we're on. And so, it's quite common for us to now talk about the treaty that we're on. And Canadians are increasingly learning where one another are, not just in Vancouver or Calgary or Montreal or Edmonton, but we're learning what treaty that those cities and
I
towns
see.
are on. And so I'm located in Anishinaabe territory, which is about halfway between Toronto and Ottawa. And the particular, I'm in Treaty 20, which is colloquially known as the Williams Treaty territories.
I see. So more familiar to me is land recognition,
Yeah,
acknowledging
yeah,
the land on which you sit or reside or are part
that's
of.
right.
And
That's
okay,
right.
that's great. Okay, that's helpful to me. Thank you for explaining that. Because we're going to talk about purpose and values, and
Mm,
um, I think you describe yourself as helping people find their purpose, helping organizations find their purpose, working on purpose-driven leadership. So let's start with you, your purpose, your values, because I guess I would assume that those shape the kind of organizational or executive coaching that you would do. So, how about your purpose? How about your values?
yeah, thanks for that. I came to the kind of work I do now through a pretty long stint in the nonprofit sector. I worked in and around healthcare and social services for the first kind of half of my career. And through that work, I became really connected with the purpose of those organizations: patient centeredness, client centeredness, helping vulnerable populations. And as I became more and more kind of exposed to corporate strategy and boards and become a CEO myself, I brought those values with me. So I'm certainly, like, things that are important to me is fairness and social justice and values of equity, transparency. Those things matter to me. And which is why, for example, the company that I founded and then exited became a B Corp. And, B corporations
No, I
are
don't
an
know what that
important.
means. What does that mean?
Oh, okay, sure. A B Corp is a kind of like external, uh, like assessment and certification around corporate social responsibility. And so they come in as an external body and they review in many, many, many different categories across your whole business, your supply chain, the way you treat your employees, the way your customers are treated, how you pay people, diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental concerns. All of that is taken into account. You kind of get a score. And if you, pass the threshold, you can then become a B Corp.
I see. Wonderful. As I think about it, so many people who are in the world of helping people to find their purpose, helping leaders to do well, to do good in the world, helping organizations um, create environments where people are able to do their best work. So
Mm-hmm.
much of it stems from a sense of humanistic values about respect for the individual, realizing that people are in a process of growth and development. Why then? I mean, coming to terms with that, I'm just trying to come to terms with that and think about that in terms of organizations. Do we think organizations and people need fixing in that regard because they don't operate from the same set of values, or is it that we're trying to do more in that regard with people? I wonder about that. Are these
Mm.
values in juxtaposition in organizations or in executives whom we encounter?
Well, I think that we're going through a transformation, like at a larger level societally. We've got new generations that are coming up that have concerns that are broader than just themselves, that the most traditional kind of versions of, I guess, sort of capitalism, where we're focused on profit only, are being heavily questioned, and the values that a whole new generation of folks that are coming through, who frankly are the workforce now, are broader than just that. Yeah, they want to make money, they want to make a living, they want to provide for their families and themselves, and they want to grow and learn. But they also want to do it within the context of not making things worse for the environment or worse for their neighbor or their communities. And so the question, I think, that sort of exists a bit larger is, how do these things come together, and can they, and where can they? And sometimes the fit is very imperfect, and other times, in fact, there's a lot of synergy. And in fact, corporations and organizations that do well in all these categories that I just mentioned are also very, very profitable. And so I think that they're just like, these are unanswered questions, but they feel like they're the zeitgeist right now.
It's so interesting. This past weekend, I visited Sunnylands in Rancho Mirage, somewhere in Coachella Valley, which was the home of the Annenbergs, who were, capitalists on steroids, in addition to being pretty wonderful philanthropists in life. Walter Annenberg also had a diplomatic career. And it's very interesting as you tour the grounds of Sunnylands and the Annenberg home in Coachella Valley. There are only 2 palm trees on the entire property. Wow. They're known as the Eisenhower palms. It's because, I guess, when Dwight Eisenhower visited there, he said, you're in the middle of the Coachella Valley. You don't have any palm trees on this place. But I thought about that in terms of, how we would think about social responsibility today. I mean, the place uses an enormous amount of water. It's all lawns because of the golf course that's there. And still a center for, where leaders, Obama, so many others use it as a place to discuss important topics like global peace. And but it's a real contrast. And I do think, as you do, that we're encountering a new generation of leaders who maybe take these ideas about sustainability and environmentalism more to heart. So let's talk about that. I mean, you talked about, values that are important to you: fairness, social justice, transparency, equity. And how do you handle working with clients who don't align with your mission and values? How do you handle that?
It's a great question. So sometimes I'll just realize early on that probably the fit's not there, and that's okay. I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. Sometimes, though, I see people that are in an early part of questioning these things. Maybe they don't have a lot of language for it. Maybe they haven't encountered it a lot in their own life. And so, the easy thing might be in that situation for me to say, "Oh, I'm, sensing that we're misaligned. That's too hard," and sort of exit stage left. Often, though, I feel a calling to support them on that journey. And so maybe we're a long way apart, but I sense some curiosity there. And so the conditions for a bit of a journey are there. And I think if I can bridge that gap and help folks come along and ask some new questions, and maybe they can create a better workforce, or a more attractive compensation package for their employees, or a more psychologically safe work environment. And because I can get into their heads about some of it and how it might actually be better for business, and it might resonate with the next generation coming through, then I consider that important work. And so I don't like to walk away from many people. I like to show up and say, you know what, like, we're all on a journey and we've all got work to do, and wherever we're starting from or wherever we're at, that's okay. And let's just do the work together.
That's great. And one of the places where I would direct our audience to, our listeners today, is to visit my website, mike-horne.com. And what I have available there are meditations on the practice of integrity, on the practice of authenticity. And I've organized it in a way that there are 52 meditations on leading a life more full of integrity. So you can do it week by week with your clients, or you can do it week by week on your own. But it's a way of getting to this. And Jonathan, this is where I want to
Mm.
pick up on Jonathan Bennett, is that for all of our coaches and consultants who are in the audience, is how do you more effectively attract clients who share the kinds of mission and values that you have?
Uh, sure. I think about business development as an inbound, like creating the conditions for success for inbound referrals. So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, but it's not where I get new clients from. I like to use LinkedIn as a way to stay in the minds of people that I'm connected with in my network. I have an active newsletter list. It is not big, but it's a very high open rate. And that's because you can't get on my newsletter unless we've met and talked. So if people randomly sign up, which does not happen very often, I reach out to them and I say, we should talk because here's the rules around my newsletter. That's important to me because inbound, creating the conditions for success for inbound referrals is how I build my business and how my business works. So that means the chances of somebody, when somebody says to somebody, oh, I've got this problem and it's really hard, and the person says, that sounds like a Jonathan Bennett problem. Let me put you in touch. That's my conditions for success working. That's when it's all aligned well. And I love it when people call me and they say, I've got a Jonathan problem. I haven't talked to you in 8 months, but like I thought of you right away. That's how I create clients.
Oh, that's really great. As my publicist says, one of the titles of her first book that she played around with was "Famous to a Few,"
Yeah,
and maybe
nice.
that's what you need to that
Yeah,
we need to strive for in our reach. I find with as you do. I mean, I have a big LinkedIn network. Uh, well over 30,000 people
yeah,
following Mike Horne, and it's insufficient to replace the kind of connection that we make with people. And there are so many people out there hawking, grow your list, make $1 million in 2 weeks without ever lifting a finger.
yeah,
And it's sort of crazy making. And yet
yeah,
it seems that there's a lot of that out there at this moment
yeah.
in time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have some quite strong thoughts on this, which I'm happy to share. And I don't know whether they'll resonate with everybody, but I have come across a lot of coaches that have transitioned from corporate, who have had wonderful careers, and or they just want to be a solopreneur or an entrepreneur for themselves, and they get taken in by all the things that you're talking about, Mike. Building funnels and content marketing and all that sort of stuff. Here's my sort of shorthand for all of this. Uh, Coaching is a one-on-one, person-to-person, high touch, high cost, like business. And so the only real way you're going to have somebody part with a significant amount of money is by providing service to them and getting to know them in a deep way. And so that can take a long time. It can take many touch points, and it can take more than an hour or two or three on the phone. And but providing that kind of value and helping people through a first few problems means they hit a point where they're like, I think I need this actually consistently. I think I want this often. And that's when they become a client. And at that point, it's a no-brainer for them. And when they're referring to other people in their network, they're like, listen, this is what you can get if you go, here's how I was helped. And so those kinds of like warm handoffs and referrals are, I think, the lifeblood of what is inherently not an online business. Like we do a lot of business development online, like we are right now in a digital space, but the actual work of it is not inherently a digital business. Of course, lots of coaches coach locally and they coach in person. And so nothing could be more analog than sitting across a table from somebody and providing coaching services right then and there. Many of us, of course, do it over the phone or over video, but the fact that we're geographically diverse doesn't change the fact that it's a one-on-one, high touch, high cost business model. And I just really I spend a lot of time helping other coaches to design marketing uh, methods that match the kind of business that coaching really is.
Yeah, I think so much of it is about trust and integrity. And my last book, Integrity by Design: Working and Living Authentically, I think it addresses this, issue of trust, which is at the core of authentic leadership. If I don't
Mm,
trust you, I won't think you have integrity. If I don't think you have integrity, I won't trust you. And I encourage people to go back and take a look at that. In our audience, Integrity by Design: Working and Living Authentically. And I think in that book, and I'm curious as to how you think about it. What do you think some of the most common challenges are that leaders face in the C-suite, in addition to the issue of trust?
yeah. I mean, when they first arrive, many experience some imposter syndrome. Many of them have worked really, really hard and they get there. And there's a kind of like, the old expression, lunch bag letdown, like they get there and they're like, oh, is this it? Like, are all the degrees and all the hustle and all of the corporate ladder climbing, like, now I'm here. Is this all there is? And that usually happens kind of in year 2, year 4 of that journey, because there's no more there. Like, they're there. And like settling into that C-suite and doing great work requires a reconstruction of your orientation. There's no more kind of up to look at. There's across to your colleagues, and then there's back down to the folks that you're trying to inspire and lift up and support and train and motivate. And so I just think it's a great big head shift when folks get there, and they're the things that come up in my coaching practice, a lot. How about you, Mike? What do you see?
Yeah, I think that's so true. Particularly working with founders turned
Yeah.
CEOs, people who have been able to scale their ideas to a substantive organization, or who have arrived, in the C-suite in the top role. I work with a lot of R&D folks, research and
Mm,
development, or technical people, and
mm,
a lot of those people come to me because of bad behaviors.
right.
uh, they think everyone around them is a moron, and yet I think fundamentally they recognize the benefits of collegiality. Solving difficult problems through science or through technology requires a lot of collegiality, requires a lot of collaboration. And there's a lot of bad behavior. And these are the people who have sort of, risen to the top, though. I mean, so they have the best of the interpersonal skills among those who are out there. So it's always a
Yeah.
challenge, I think, to, you know, um, hold up the mirror, to
Oh, yeah.
speak truth to power. And I think that's, in executive teams, I think that's one of the great hallmarks of teamwork is that when members are able to, have real conversations with each other. But
Oh,
there's so
yeah.
much fear
Yeah.
that exists
Yeah.
that, I think that's
Yeah.
part of what we deal
It's
with as coaches.
it's really true. I often think about it like it's like the secret inner life of teams.
Uh
There's
huh.
something that's happening underneath the surface, and really, it's the sum total of each individual's, uh, you know, psychological makeup and their triggers and their experiences. That is the alchemy that really is a team. One of the things that I love to do, I don't, maybe you do this too, but I love to do like team-based coaching. I love to have a you and sit with each person on the team for 10, 15 minutes and coach them in front of everybody else, and then rotate it through, because it's not, and of course the magic of it is less about the experience for the one person that I'm coaching, although hopefully that's good. It's more about the fact that they're being witnessed by their colleagues, because then when you check in with their colleagues, you're able to say, what showed up for you as you were listening to, Sally or Bob here at the front? And they're able to say, oh my God, I've been there too, or I had no idea that was on their plate, or, oh God, I'm seeing that except from the other side, or whatever the circumstance may be. And just the level of being seen, being heard, being witnessed tends to you know, be the great sort of result of that level of vulnerability, and teams can really accelerate through a lot of distance between each of the members in that environment.
Yeah, I often think that the best ways to create inclusion in any kind of team is to learn to say hello. That we're so
Nice.
focused on task accomplishment. Get this done for me, get this report. That we forget to
Yeah.
say hello to one another. And I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
happened. I always think about this in coaching context. I don't know what happened to the person 5 minutes before I met them, or I don't know what's going to happen to them 5 minutes later. But I can, bring a sense of presence, a sense of
Mm,
discernment, figuring out what's work, and a sense of hope in what we're doing. So I'm curious, based on
nice.
your experiences, Jonathan Bennett, as a hospital executive in a former life, what
Hmm.
advice do you have for leaders who are struggling to have a good blend of work and life? Um, and don't
Yeah.
want to give up the corporate gig or corporate world.
Yeah, it's really it's really one of the great questions of our time, I think. I mean, for myself, I was on the C-suite of a huge regional hospital. I would get there at 6:45 to meet with doctors before rounds, and I probably didn't get out of there until 11 o'clock at night after the last of the audit and finance committee board members had waddled out of the room. And so I found myself more often than not working on fumes, and it was very unhealthy, like physically unhealthy, which is ironic because there I was in a hospital. But often they're some of the sickest places to work,
Yeah.
depending on the environment, which is sad. Um, but it becomes it comes back to yourself. What kind of boundaries are you willing to set and protect? How do you communicate what your needs are to your colleagues so you can get them met? How do you communicate when your needs are not being met? And how do you negotiate that space between the two of you? I'm big on building agreements with team members. And to me, the most explicit agreement building uh, can go on between teams as they're defining how they're going to do the work together. And the more explicit and the clearer that we are with our boundaries and with our agreement building, then I think that the better the chance is for a work-life balance, a psychologically safe environment, those kinds of things.
Yes, I hope to tackle many of these topics in my next book, mid October, it'll be out by the
Awesome.
same title as the podcast, The People Dividend. But
Mm,
it's really outlines a set of leadership strategies to unlock potential.
mm,
Because there's so much wasted potential in organizations because of how we categorize people, how we think about people, what we
oh
do to
yeah,
people, and to really think about the expression of humanistic values. I think all of the stuff that we've talked about, fairness, transparency, equity, that can
yeah,
unlock that potential. I've spent a lot of time, in my corporate careers designing great places to work so people could be on these lists of or acknowledged as a great place to work. And it's really more about creating places where people do their best work and making that
mm.
leadership
Oh, I
shift
love
to
that.
creating
Yeah.
those kinds of organizations and those kinds of team experiences for people. So
Mm,
that leads me to culture, which I talk less about today because I think more about community at work. But let's talk about culture. And a safe, accountable culture is difficult to build. So what do you think people can do to build these, psychologically safe workplaces, these accountable cultures, these places where people do bring their best to work? What are some recommendations or suggestions you might have, Jonathan Bennett?
Yeah, thanks. Like I think a lot of people talking about psychological safety in the last 5 to 7 years. Amy Edmondson's book is obviously a great place to start if this is a new topic for you. Uh, when we can be ourselves at work, when we can show up and do our best work without fear of retribution or ridicule, then we're in a kind of psychologically safe work environment. I think the important note to make is that it's not static. It's not like a checkbox, like we've reached a threshold and now therefore we are safe. In fact, it's pretty dynamic. And so when we work with humans, they bring whatever it is that's going on in their regular life with them to work every day. And so things that might have been okay last year might need to be renegotiated this year. around how we are together in the workplace. And that needs to be okay. That people change, circumstances can change, and the way we design how we are together can change. So I think there's some of the like really important things. I mean, for me, it goes back to boundary setting. And I think the flip side of psychological safety is accountability. That's accountability to ourselves, accountability to our teammates, and accountability to the organization, the company overall. And so those three levels are also need to be in play. We need to show up and follow through and follow up on what we said we were going to do. We need to be the right kind of team member and the right kind of colleague. And so there's a deep level of personal accountability there. We need to be accountable to and for our colleagues, and they need to feel the same way about us. So I've got your back. When we leave the room, Mike, I'm not going to talk crap about you. I'm going to say that, we had a hard discussion and we came to a decision and we both agreed, not three under the proverbial bus. And then the organization overall, that we are working for a place that we believe in and that we're pretty sure believes in us, that we know the organization is accountable to me and my career and helping me. And I feel the same about it. I'm going to give my best effort in good faith to work in service of the organization.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think it's always about choosing service over self-interest. And for people to learn more about or to connect with Jonathan Bennett, you can visit him at clearlythen.com. It'll be in the show notes. So if that doesn't stick with you now, clearlythen.com, take a look at the show notes and you'll be able to find ways to get in touch with Jonathan and through his LinkedIn site, Bennett Jonathan. And it's been a wonderful treat for me to be in discussion with you, Jonathan. And I was just wondering, as a last question and a way of beginning to wrap up our conversation in this podcast episode of The People Dividend today, is how has your poetry influenced your approach to coaching and executive development, organization development?
Yeah, what a great question. And one I wished I got more often. Poor poetry. So what I love about it is poetry is a very quiet, private, and small thing, but it's precious. And I think that the space that happens between a client and a coach is a very intimate one. And I liken it to poetry. Poetry and a poem, and the way a poem is, the way a reader reads a poem and what they get out of it is very personal. And I think that same space, that very intimate space, is true between a coach and a leader. And those very private thoughts and those very private hopes and aspirations and, challenges that are worked on is similar. And I love that sort of very fine attention to detail, that deep listening, that deep understanding in both those realms. And I think that's how one informs the other, for sure.
That's so great. When people ask me to describe my skill sets, I usually say I'm a really good listener. And I think I learned that from one of my mentors in particular, is that the solution often lies in very effective and deep listening. It's been an absolute delight for me to be in conversation today with Jonathan Bennett, clearlythen.com, a place to reach him. So, Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone for listening.
Appreciate it. And until the next episode of The People Dividend, stay well.